I want to start today by having you set a scene in your mind.
Yeah.
Imagine you're standing in a room that is just it's absolutely chaotic. Maybe it's a high-stakes board meeting where the quarterly numbers are just completely tanking, or maybe it's even a family dinner that has gone entirely off the rails.
We've all been there.
Right. And everyone in this room is vibrating at this really high frequency of panic. There's shouting, there's a lot of blaming going around, just noise, endless noise. But then as you're looking around, your eyes land on this one person.
And they're not panicking.
Exactly. They aren't running around. They aren't trying to shout over the noise. They're just there. And strangely, they don't look checked out at all. They actually look like they're the only one in the room who truly sees the weight of what's happening.
Yeah, that's a very specific kind of gravitational pull.
Yeah.
It's the person who anchors the room, not by force, but by density, I guess you could say.
Density. That is the perfect word for it. Because today we are doing a deep dive into a personality type that basically defines that density. We're looking at the FFAU,
Also known as the soul diver.
the soul diver. And this comes from the Max Energy ME80 personality system. Our mission today is to figure out what actually makes these people tick. Because on the surface, they seem very quiet, maybe even a bit melancholic. But according to the data we're looking at, there is a massive amount of processing power humming underneath all that silence.
There really is. And, to truly understand the soul diver, we have to first understand the tool we're actually using here, the Max Energy ME80 system. It isn't your standard run-of-the-mill personality quiz.
Right. It doesn't just ask if you prefer parties or reading a book.
Exactly. It doesn't care about your hobbies.
Mm.
It digs into the bioenergetic wiring of a person. It looks at how you metabolize emotional energy, how your brain calculates decisions under pressure, and how you project yourself into the world. It's less about personality in the social sense and much more about your internal operating system.
So it's the wiring under the dashboard?
Yeah, the literal circuitry.
Yeah.
And for the FAU, the soul diver, that wiring creates a very, very unique profile.
So let's start where we usually start with these profiles, the identity definition. The report uses a phrase that, honestly, it just stopped me in my tracks when I first read it.
Mm-hmm.
It defines the soul diver's core state as, and I'm quoting here, inner melancholy as the gateway to perception.
It's a striking phrase, isn't it?
It really is. But I have to pause you right there because in our culture, melancholy is usually treated like a bad word. It's treated like a bug, not a feature. We tell people to cheer up, to look on the bright side. So are we saying this profile is are they just sad all the time?
That is probably the most common misconception with this type. In the ME80 context, melancholy is not depression. It's not a malfunction in their system. Think of it more as depth perception.
Depth perception. How do you mean?
Well, most of us, the report calls us the surfers of the world. We skim the surface. We like the sunlight. We like the fast waves, the speed. But the soul diver, they are biologically and energetically designed for the deep ocean.
Oh, wow. Okay, so where I might look at a situation and see a bad mood, what do they see? Data.
They see the underlying truth. In fact, the hero section of the assessment describes their ultimate superpower as diving silently into the depths of the soul. They don't just see that a person is acting out or angry. They feel the grief underneath that anger. The grief the other person hasn't even admitted to themselves yet.
That's intense.
It is. They turn that raw sorrow into insight.
But that is such a heavy burden to carry around. I mean, the report specifically notes that they, quote, receive weight through presence itself.
Right. And that's a huge distinction. Unlike a fixer, the type, the person who immediately hands you a tissue and says, well, at least you have your health.
Yeah.
The soul diver knows that sometimes the absolute most powerful thing you can do for someone is just witness their pain without flinching.
Without trying to slap a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. They don't offer a quick solution. They offer companionship in the dark.
Which is incredibly rare. I feel like most people are terrified of the dark. So if that is their internal landscape, this deep, heavy, oceanic state, how do they actually navigate the real world? Because let's be real, you can't just sit around being deep and melancholic all day.
I have to pay bills.
Right. You have to pay bills. You have to handle conflicts at work. The report talks about their control mechanism. How does a soul diver actually take control of a situation?
This is fascinating because Their approach is the exact opposite of what we typically picture when we think of a leader. They don't try to dominate a room physically. They don't talk the loudest. Their specific control mechanism is called deep immersion understanding.
Deep immersion understanding. Break that down for me. What does that look like in action?
Okay, let's go back to the ship analogy. The ship is rocking in a massive storm. A dominant, typical leadership type grabs the wheel and just starts barking orders. Do this, tie that down. The soul diver doesn't do that. They go straight down to the engine room to figure out exactly why the engine is stalling in the first place.
Right.
They only feel a sense of control when they completely understand the root cause of a problem.
So if they are forced to act without understanding that root cause,
They freeze. If you force them to act without understanding the underlying meaning or the why, they feel completely lost. It's highly distressing for them.
so to a soul diver, chaos isn't just loud noise. Chaos is a lack of meaning.
That's a great way to put it. They stabilize themselves and the people around them by finding the narrative thread. They ask, why is this happening right now? What is the emotional origin of this conflict? And once they grasp that origin, they are completely immovable. But if a boss just walks up and says, do this right now because I said so, they will short circuit. They have no map for arbitrary demands.
Okay, that makes perfect sense as a philosophy, but I want to get under the hood now. The ME80 system is built on this four-letter code structure, the energy matrix. For the soul diver, it's FFAU. And I always feel like these letters hide the real mechanical story. We need to decode this matrix.
Let's do it. So we have 4 layers to get through: IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation. This is the literal biological sequence of how they process energy from start to finish.
Let's start at the very bottom, the core engine. Layer 1 is the IP, or the inner value layer. And the code fact here says energy drives initiation.
This is a crucial point to understand.
It is, because initiation sounds like a really active word for someone we just described as a quiet, deep-sea diver.
Right, and this corrects a massive bias people have against introverted types. We see a quiet person sitting in the back of a meeting, and we just assume they're passive or they're waiting to be told what to do. The soul diver is not passive. Their core values act as a powerful engine. They initiate their engagement with the world entirely from the inside out.
So they don't wait for the external world to coax them.
Not at all. They are driven by a very strong, unyielding internal conviction.
So the car's running, it's just sitting in neutral?
The car is revving. They're simply deciding if they actually want to put it in gear. If a project or a relationship doesn't align with their internal values, they won't budge. You cannot force them. But the moment it does align, that internal engine kicks in and they initiate with incredible force.
Got it. Strong internal drive. So moving up to layer 2, the IQ. This is the emotional activation layer. The report says intuition and speed judgment. Wait speed. I thought we just established they were slow, deliberate, deep immersion types.
This is the first big paradox of the FFAU profile, and honestly, it confuses people all the time.
Yeah.
Externally, yes, they look very deliberate, maybe even a little hesitant. But internally, they're lightning fast. Their ability to process emotional data is completely intuitive and almost instantaneous.
So they walk into that chaotic boardroom we talked about earlier.
And within milliseconds, they have completely mapped the emotional geometry of everyone at that table. They know the CEO is overcompensating for insecurity. They know the intern is terrified. They know the client is bluffing. They just know it, often before they even have the language to explain how they know.
Honestly, that sounds exhausting. Just having that sheer volume of raw data flooding your system instantly.
It is incredibly taxing, which is exactly why Layer 3 is so critical to their survival. This is the EQ layer, the decision calculation layer. And the source fact for this one is emotional detachment and understanding.
Hold on a second. Detachment. We just spent 10 minutes calling them the soul diver who feels everybody's hidden grief. How can they be detached? That feels like a total contradiction.
It sounds like one, but it's actually their primary survival mechanism. Think of a trauma surgeon. A surgeon cares deeply about saving the patient's life, obviously. But if they are standing there crying over the open wound, they can't make the cut. To save the life, they have to detach from the immediate horror and focus on the anatomy.
Oh, wow. And that's the soul diver.
That is the absolute genius of the FFAU. They have this incredibly hot input feeling, everything via that fast IQ layer, but they possess a cool output mechanism. The EQ layer allows them to look at that massive flood of emotion and say, okay, this is data. I am observing this anger. I understand where it comes from, but I am not going to drown in it.
So it's the difference between drowning in the ocean and sitting inside a submarine looking out the window. You're in the extreme depth, but you aren't actually wet.
That is the perfect analogy. That detachment allows them to make highly rational calculations right in the middle of an emotional hurricane, which is exactly why they are so unbelievably valuable in a crisis. They feel the storm, but they're calculating the safest path through it.
Okay, so we've got the engine in the IP layer, the fast processor in the IQ, and the cool decision maker in the EQ. Now we reach layer 4, the manifestation layer. This is how the world actually sees them. The report notes, energy operates inward carrying, absorbing, integrating.
This is what creates that quiet anchor vibe you noticed. Most people in our society manifest their energy outward. We explode, we project, we talk over each other, we wave our hands. The soul diver manifests by imploding.
Imploding usually sounds, destructive, like a building being demolished.
Think of it in terms of physics, not demolition. Think of a black hole. Not the terrifying sci-fi kind that eats entire galaxies, but just the sheer gravitational pull of it. It draws things inward. The soul diver pulls the frantic energy of a room into themselves so they can process it. They carry the atmosphere.
I've actually felt that before with certain people. You talk to them, and it feels like your words are actually landing somewhere deep. They aren't just bouncing off a brick wall.
Because they are actively absorbing you. They're integrating your words, your tone, your posture into their internal framework. It's a continuous process of taking the messy external world and pulling it into their deep sea to finally make sense of it.
So, knowing how they are wired now, let's talk about what this looks like in everyday practice. The report goes deep into their inner traits. The core trait is listed as deep immersion understanding. If I'm just sitting across a cafe table from a soul diver, what are they actually doing while I'm talking?
They are listening to what the system calls the echoes beyond words.
The echoes beyond words. That's actually very poetic.
It essentially means they are reading the subtext while you're reading the text. You might sit down and say, "Hey, I'm fine, just a little tired from work lately." The soul diver hears the slight tremor in your voice. They notice the micro expression around your eyes, and they hear, "I'm terrified, I'm failing at my job, and I have absolutely no one to talk to about it."
And do they call you out on that? Do they look across the table and say, "Hey, I know you're lying to me"?
Rarely. They aren't aggressive like that. They don't corner you. Instead, the framework says they accompany you to see the truth clearly.
That's a very gentle approach.
It is. They might just ask one question, but it will be a question that is so precise, so incredibly targeted, that it just unlocks the thing you were hiding even from yourself. They help you take this chaotic mess of anxiety and transform it into a coherent narrative. They essentially hold up a mirror, a very dark, calm mirror, and they let you see yourself without any judgment.
That sounds incredibly healing for the other person. But, and there is always a but, when we do these deep dives, being a human sponge for everyone else's misery has to come with a massive cost. You can't just absorb emotional radiation all day and not get sick.
Precisely. And this leads us right into their shadow blind spot. The ME80 report calls this trap internal dissolution overload.
Internal dissolution overload. That sounds like a catastrophic system failure warning on a nuclear reactor.
It effectively is a system failure. Because their manifestation layer is constantly absorbing and their IQ layer is feeling things so fast, they suffer from this hidden depletion. They look totally calm on the outside, so no one around them realizes their battery is flashing at 1%.
And because their inner value layer is an initiator, I assume they just push through and think they can handle it?
They do. Their first instinct when they are completely overwhelmed isn't to vent or scream or ask for help. It's to suppress. They swallow it. They genuinely believe, if I just process this more, if I just think about it harder, I can solve it on my own.
Which leads to the specific symptom the report mentions: repeated self-reflection intensifying burden. And it notes this often surfaces as overthinking in the late hours.
Ah, yes. The dreaded 3 a.m. audit.
The nemesis of the soul diver. Why is it always 3 a.m.?
Because that is the only time the external world finally stops throwing new data at them. So they lie there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and they just replay everything. Every conversation, every slight nuance, every emotional shift they absorb during the day.
Trying to file it all away.
Right, but because they're exhausted, they can't file it. They just loop it. Why did she use that tone? Did I respond the right way? Should I have asked a different question? This creates a massive lag in their psychological recovery time. A conflict that takes a surfer type an hour to shake off might take a soul diver 3 whole days to metabolize.
Wow. So if you're listening to this and you constantly feel emotionally hungover, even on days when nothing particularly dramatic happened,
You might very well be a soul diver who is carrying everybody else's luggage. And you urgently need to learn how to put the bags down before you try to go to sleep.
Let's pivot to how this impacts their social relations. We've painted a picture of this intense, deep, slightly exhausted submarine captain. How does a person like that come across at a standard dinner party?
Well, they definitely aren't the person dancing on the table with a lampshade on their head. The report describes their interaction style as silent companionship. They appear very gentle, very quiet, and often tinged with that melancholy we discussed.
There's that gravity again.
Yes, they thrive in one-on-one settings or very small groups. If you want to stand around and talk about the weather or sports scores, the soul diver will be perfectly polite, but internally they will be bored out of their minds. They want the real stuff, the deep stuff.
Which, let's be honest, can be a little intense for some people.
It is absolutely a double-edged sword. On one hand, they offer this massive sense of security to their close friends. If you are truly friends with a soul diver, you feel completely known. But for new people, that level of intensity can be deeply intimidating. Their silence can feel judgmental, even when it isn't.
Right, because they aren't filling the air with nervous chatter. They aren't smiling and nodding and saying, "Oh, wow, cool." They're just looking at you.
And people tend to project their own insecurities into that empty space. They think, oh no, does he hate me? Is she analyzing my flaws? The answer is almost always no. They are just deeply listening. But it can be unnerving if you aren't used to that kind of focused attention.
So, given all of this, the incredible depth, the sharp intuition, the risk of burnout, where do these people actually belong in the workforce? Because the corporate world is usually very loud, very fast, and very superficial. What is their real commercial value?
The soul diver's commercial value is highly specific. Their strength is not in volume, and it is certainly not in speed. If you hire a soul diver for high-pressure sales cold calling, you will completely destroy them. Their true commercial value lies in authenticity and root cause analysis.
The report lists a few recommended career fields for them. Obviously, psychological support and counseling is right at the top.
That's their natural habitat.
Yeah.
Sitting in the fire with someone, they possess the emotional stamina for other people's pain that most of us completely lack.
I found this next recommendation really interesting. In-depth interviews and social research.
Think about it from a data perspective. If you are a UX researcher or an investigative journalist, and you need to get past the rehearsed PR answers to find the actual truth, who do you send? You send the person who naturally reads the subtext, the person who makes the interviewee feel safe enough to drop their mask. The soul diver asks the one question that opens the floodgates.
That makes total sense. They are the ultimate truth seekers. What else is on the list?
Content creation and narrative design. We talked about how they create inner narratives to make sense of the world. That skill translates beautifully to writing, to storytelling, even to video game design. They can create characters and worlds that have genuine emotional weight because they deeply understand the mechanics of feeling.
And the last one listed here is collaborative teams, specifically those requiring emotional understanding.
So think about crisis management teams, hospice care staffs, or high-stakes negotiation units. You desperately need someone who can act as the emotional architect of the team. Someone who can spot the hidden fracture lines in the group dynamic long before the whole thing breaks apart.
They keep the team glued together.
Exactly. They are the silent glue.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. From the FFAU internal wiring, that crazy paradox of having a super fast heart but a cool, detached head, to the very real danger of the late-night overthinking loop. If we had to boil everything down for the listener, what is the core essence of the soul diver?
I think it really comes back to that concept of witnessing. In a modern world that is so completely obsessed with fixing, with changing, with constantly upgrading everything, the soul diver has the rare courage to just sit and be with what is.
The source material actually has a golden sentence that wraps this up perfectly. I think this is the ultimate provocative thought for you to take away today.
It really is. The report says, and I quote, "When a person no longer feels alone through being truly heard, the world, despite its sorrow, finally has someone to sit within it."
Someone to sit within it. That is incredibly powerful because it isn't about magically making the sorrow disappear. It's about taking away the isolation of it.
And that is a profound, life-changing gift to give to another human being.
Well, if you have been listening to this and thinking, wow, I think I might be the submarine captain, or maybe you're thinking, I finally understand why my partner just stares at the ceiling at 3 a.m., then you have been looking at the FFAU Soul Diver profile.
And remember, this is just one specific profile found in the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. It is an incredibly comprehensive system that really gets into the granular mechanics of our energy, just like we did today.
Absolutely. So if you want to find your own specific energy code, or if you just want to nerd out on the system itself, you can visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com. Or you can search on Facebook for the Max Energy Personality Assessment or the Met Energy Personality Psychology pages.
There's an entire ecosystem of energy dynamics waiting to be explored over there.
Indeed, there is. Thank you so much for diving deep with us today into the quiet, powerful waters of the soul diver. Until next time, take care of your energy.
Goodbye.